The light in the room was low, soft gold washing over the worn floorboards and the peeling paint of the attic apartment. It wasn't the kind of setting where fantasies were meant to unfold. There were no candles, no perfume, no promises, just silence and the sound of her breathing. Calla stood near the edge of the bed, her back to him, fingers trembling only slightly as she reached for the hem of her shirt. Julius Vance stood across the room, arms folded, his expensive coat still on, untouched by the intimacy that threatened to bloom. His face was unreadable, cold, curious, and something else he didn't dare name. She pulled the shirt over her head slowly, not with seduction, not with flair, but with the quiet finality of someone removing a mask. Piece by piece, armor came off. Her shoulders, pale and marked by time, caught the light just enough to reveal the jagged scar running from the curve of her shoulder blade down the slope of her back. She didn't turn around. "You think I'm doing this to tempt you," she said, voice calm, as if commenting on the weather. Julius said nothing. Calla let the shirt fall to the floor. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. "You've looked at me like I'm a puzzle since the first night we met," she continued, "but I'm not here for you to solve." Still, he said nothing. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on that single silver line across her skin. "I'm showing you what I've spent years hiding," she said, "because if you're going to walk away, I'd rather it be now." Finally, he spoke. "You don't have to prove anything to me." She let out a short laugh. It wasn't bitter. It was tired. "This isn't about proving," she replied. "It's about truth. Mine. This scar isn't the worst of it. It's just the part people can see." Julius took a step forward. One. Careful. As if she might shatter. Or maybe he would. "Who did that to you?" he asked, the words scraping out of his throat like broken glass. "Does it matter?" she said. "What matters is whether you can look at it and still want to see the rest of me." Julius was not the kind of man who lost control. He'd negotiated mergers with men who smiled as they planned to stab him in the back. He'd stood before rooms of board members and made them obey with nothing but a glance. He didn't fidget, he didn't flinch. But now his hands were curling into fists at his sides. "I didn't come here for this," he said finally, though even he wasn't sure what he meant. Calla turned slowly then, not in shame, not in fear, but in the kind of stillness that only came from surviving something that tried to kill you. "No," she said, "you came here thinking this was a game, maybe a challenge, another thing to control." Her eyes met his, brown, steady, and unreadable in a different way. Not the emptiness of someone hiding, but the calm of someone who had already faced the worst and chosen to live anyway. "I'm not your fantasy, Julius. I'm not your project. I'm not another woman waiting to be rescued." His breath caught. "I didn't know what I was looking for," he said quietly. "Then maybe it's time you find out," she replied. Silence again, but not the awkward kind, the kind that held weight, that asked questions without speaking, that dared you to stay or walk away. He didn't move. She stood there, exposed in every way that mattered, not asking for love, not begging for acceptance, but simply existing, fully, bravely. And Julius Vance, for the first time in years, didn't feel like a man in control. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something real. Calla Moreno wasn't supposed to be in his world. She didn't belong to the polished marble floors of corporate headquarters or the glossy circles of Manhattan's elite. She belonged to after-hours silence, to fading tattoo ink, and notebooks filled with poems that never found a home. At 26, she had lived enough lives to stop pretending she owed anyone a neat narrative. By day, she worked at a quiet tattoo parlor tucked between a laundromat and a pawnshop in Brooklyn, where clients came more for the conversation than the ink. By night, she danced at a low-lit club 3 subway stops away, not because she loved the stage, but because it paid better than anything else she could find without a degree. She lived in a studio apartment that smelled like old wood and chamomile tea. Every inch of it reflected her. Practical, unpretentious, a little broken, but still standing. Her body carried stories it never got to tell. A long scar across her back from the night she finally left her father's house. A faded burn on her thigh from a kitchen job she didn't keep. A small, simple tattoo near her collarbone that read, "Stay," in lowercase script. Most people never saw any of it. They only saw the girl with dark eyes and a quiet mouth who never drank too much, never stayed too late, and always paid in cash. She didn't chase men, she didn't play games, and she never, ever asked for anything she couldn't earn. Julius Vance was the opposite in every way. At 35, he ran a portfolio of investments larger than most countries' GDPs. Born into money, sharpened by Ivy League education, and 2 decades in the shark tank of corporate finance, Julius didn't know what it meant to ask. He commanded, he acquired, he conquered. His name carried weight, his silence carried more. They called him the quiet executioner behind closed doors. He didn't threaten. He didn't raise his voice. He just dismantled companies, lives, and sometimes people with the calm precision of someone who had long since forgotten what it meant to hesitate. But underneath the tailored suits and the private jet bookings was a man whose emotional compass had been broken for years. He hadn't dated in any real sense since his sister died. Caroline had been 2 years younger, a dreamer, an actress, and the only person who ever made Julius laugh without trying. Her overdose had been ruled accidental. Julius never believed that. Not when he knew the kind of men she had trusted, not when he saw the hollow left in her eyes weeks before it happened. Since then, Julius built walls around himself so high he forgot what sunlight felt like. He didn't believe in connection, he didn't believe in healing, he believed in risk management, silence, and loyalty purchased in contracts. Until Kala. Their paths crossed at a closed event Julius had reluctantly agreed to attend. His assistant said the appearance would soften his public image, that a few photos with the right woman would quiet the murmurs among investors who preferred their billionaires smiling. He didn't care, but he went. The venue was noise and polish and flattery. Kala was in the background, hired as a performer, though she never touched the pole that night. She moved differently, not like she was there to be seen, but like she dared anyone to look closer. Julius did. He watched her across the room for 10 minutes before realizing he wasn't blinking. When their eyes met, it was only for a moment, but in that moment she didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't even try. And that alone made her unforgettable. A week later, he found her again. Not at the club, but at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. She was in line ahead of him, counting crumpled bills, unaware that the most feared man on Wall Street stood 2 steps behind her. He didn't speak to her then. He followed her out, not in some sinister way, but because he needed to know if what he saw was real. She turned the corner and walked into a tattoo parlor with a hand-painted sign. He returned the next day, this time as a client. He asked for something small, meaningless, just to sit in her chair. "You want a tattoo, but you don't know what you want?" she asked, glancing up at him with the kind of calm that undressed every layer of pretense. "Story of my life," he muttered, and she raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe don't start it on your skin." Still, she inked a single line across his shoulder blade. He hadn't told anyone what it meant, not even her. After that day, he came back. Not for tattoos, for her. At first, she was cautious, but Julius had a way of making himself part of people's routines. Eventually, she agreed to a strange proposal. He had a series of high-level events approaching. She would be his companion. No intimacy, no pretense, just presence. She asked for 3 things in return. First, full freedom to leave at any time. Second, no assumptions about her. Third, If he wanted honesty, he had to give it back. Julius agreed, and so it began. A billionaire and a girl with a scar, orbiting each other in a world that never saw either of them clearly. The first event was a formal dinner hosted by one of Julius's major investors. Calla arrived in a sleek black dress picked out by one of his stylists, heels that pinch slightly, and hair pulled back in a way she wasn't used to. Julius hadn't seen her until she stepped out of the car. When he did, he paused for just a breath longer than usual. He didn't compliment her. He never did. But that night, as they stood in the elevator headed to the rooftop ballroom, he said quietly, "You carry silence like a crown." She glanced at him. "Is that your way of saying I clean up well?" He didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "I'm saying people will see you, even if they don't understand why." And they did. The moment she entered the room, heads turned, not because of her dress or her presence on his arm, but because of how unaffected she seemed by all of it. She didn't laugh too loudly or clutch his hand for show. She didn't pretend to belong. She simply stood beside him, observing, unafraid of what they thought. Julius watched her closely that night. When someone tried to corner her with questions about their relationship, she answered with 3 words: "Ask him later." When an old friend of his made a sly comment about his taste in companions, Calla leaned forward just enough to whisper, "It's not taste, it's instinct, and his got better recently." That earned her a blink of surprise and a rare, genuine smile from Julius. He didn't know when it started, the noticing, the way she stirred her coffee without looking, the way she read food labels even when she didn't buy anything, the way she touched her shoulder unconsciously when she was trying not to feel vulnerable. He told himself it was curiosity, that it didn't mean anything, but it did, and she noticed him too, the way he avoided eye contact when speaking about his past, how he clenched his jaw before responding to compliments, how he spent hours in silence, not because he was cold, but because he didn't know what to say without control. One night, after an exhausting fundraiser where Julius had to schmooze half the city's elite, they sat in the back of his town car in silence. Calla kicked off her shoes, pulled her legs up onto the seat, and rested her head back. "You don't actually like any of them," she said. "No," he replied, "but you smile like you do." He looked at her then. "So do you." She laughed softly. "Yeah, but I don't charge them for it." His eyes lingered. "And me?" She looked out the window. "You don't pay for the smile, you pay for the presence." The words hit harder than he expected. By the 3rd event, their rhythm had shifted. He started offering her his arm without being asked. She started straightening his tie if it was even slightly off. When people asked how long they'd been together, they both paused before answering, not because they were hiding, but because neither of them knew the answer. It wasn't a relationship, but it wasn't just a performance either. There were nights Julius stayed later at the tattoo shop, watching her work. There were mornings she left notes in the pocket of his coat. Simple things. Drink water. Try sleeping. Don't forget who you are. He didn't know why those notes mattered, only that they did. Calla, on her part, kept her distance where it counted. She didn't ask about his childhood. She didn't demand stories. But when he spoke, she listened, fully, and without interruption. One night, he told her about Caroline, about the last message she left him that he never answered. She said she just needed someone to remind her she mattered. Calla said nothing, but the next morning, Julius found a piece of paper on his desk with 7 words. "You matter, even when you don't believe it." Still, they both pretended. They kept the lines clean, until they couldn't. It started with a touch. At a press conference, she placed her hand on his arm as he answered a tense question. Not for the cameras, just for him. He didn't acknowledge it, but that night he called her, just to hear her voice. She picked up and said, "I'm not great on the phone." He replied, "That makes two of us." Silence followed, but it was warm, not empty. One evening, after a particularly brutal meeting with the board, Julius walked into the parlor unannounced. Calla was alone, cleaning her station. She looked up, startled. "You okay?" He shook his head. "I don't know." She nodded, turned off the machine, and poured 2 cups of weak coffee. He sat in the chair where she usually worked. She perched on the edge of the counter. "Ever feel like the whole world's running and you're just standing still?" he asked. She tilted her head. "Yeah, but sometimes standing still is the bravest thing you can do." He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw it. The shift, the unraveling. He stayed that night, not in her bed, on the couch, not because he had to, but because he didn't want to be alone. In the morning, she found him still there, fully dressed, holding one of her notebooks. She didn't get angry. She just sat beside him. "You read my poems?" He looked at her, eyes unreadable. "I think they read me." The tension grew in quiet ways, not through arguments or declarations, but through the things unsaid, the near touches, the shared silences, the way her name sounded different when he said it. One night he caught her humming in the kitchen. She didn't know he was watching. Her hair was messy. She wore mismatched socks. And he had never seen anything more honest. He stepped closer. She turned. Their eyes met. Nothing was said, but something passed between them, a decision neither of them could voice. Still, they waited, pushed it back, until it could no longer be ignored. The next chapter would not begin with a kiss. It would begin with truth. And the moment she asked him the one question he didn't know how to answer, "Would you still want me if I told you the ugliest part of my story?" It was past midnight when she asked him. The air between them was still, heavy with something neither of them wanted to name. They were sitting in her apartment, lights dimmed, music low, a forgotten cup of tea cooling on the windowsill. Julius had taken off his tie, undone the first 2 buttons of his shirt, his posture more relaxed than usual, but his guard still intact. Calla was curled up in the oversized armchair near the corner, a blanket wrapped loosely around her legs, one hand cradling a chipped mug she hadn't touched in an hour. "Would you still want me?" she asked softly, "if I told you the ugliest part of my story?" The question didn't hit him like a strike. It landed slowly, like rain building into a flood. He didn't answer immediately. He looked at her instead. No one had ever asked him something like that with such calm, such certainty that the truth would cost something. "What's the ugliest part?" he asked, though his voice lacked the confidence he was known for. Calla didn't move. "The part I never told anyone without losing them." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "Then tell me." She didn't cry. She didn't break down. She told the story like a survivor naming her scars. She was 16. Her father was a former Marine with strict rules and unpredictable moods. Her mother tried to keep peace, but peace was a short-lived guest in their house. One night, after Calla refused to explain a bruise on her arm at school, her father lost it. She remembered the belt, the smell of whiskey, the scream that never made it past her throat. That night, she ran. She didn't stop running for 3 years. No foster care, no reports, just couches and basements and any job that would pay in cash. The scar on her back came from a broken mirror in a shelter bathroom. She'd tried to stitch it herself. She told him everything. About the nights she danced because it was the only way to afford groceries. About the clients who tried to buy more than a dance. About the ones who didn't take no well. About the therapy she never finished. The dreams that made her wake up in a sweat. The way she sometimes touched the scar just to remind herself it had healed. When she finished Barani, she didn't look at him. "So," she said, voice quiet, "still want me?" Julius didn't move right away. His hands were clasped together so tightly his knuckles had turned white. When he spoke, his voice was rough. I want every version of you, even the ones you think are too damaged to be loved. Calla finally turned to face him. Even the girl who used to lie about her name just to feel safe? Especially her, he said. She set the mug down, stood, walked toward him. Her steps were slow, measured, but not hesitant. She stopped in front of him, and for the first time in all the weeks they'd spent orbiting each other, she didn't ask for permission. She simply reached down, took his hand, and placed it against her side just below the ribcage, where the skin was soft and unmarked. "This," she said, "is the only place on my body without a scar." He looked up at her. "Then I'll start there." What followed wasn't rushed. It wasn't about lust or release. It was about choice, about being seen. He undressed her like someone peeling back pages of a fragile book, careful not to tear the story inside. She undressed him like a woman who had been taught that men could only take, and now finally met one who didn't want to. When he traced the scar on her back, she didn't flinch. She watched his eyes instead. When he kissed the spot just above her collarbone, she closed hers, not in fear, but in surrender. They moved together like people who had nothing to prove but everything to risk. His hands didn't linger where they shouldn't. Hers didn't hesitate when they found the place where his heartbeat lived. And afterward, in the quiet tangle of sheets and breath and open windows, she lay with her head on his chest and whispered, "I didn't think I'd ever want this." He didn't ask what this meant. He just wrapped an arm around her shoulder and said, "Me neither." The next morning, they didn't rush. He made coffee. She found one of his shirts and wore it like armor. They sat on the couch, legs touching, eyes soft. For the first time, there were no walls, just two people and the truth between them. But even in that peace, something hovered. The knowledge that the outside world wouldn't understand what they had. That someone, somewhere, would try to twist it into something it wasn't. That evening, Calla walked Julius to the elevator. He stood there, looking at her like he was memorizing the way she leaned against the doorframe, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear. "I know this doesn't make sense," he said. "It doesn't have to," she replied. "Not yet." As the elevator doors began to close, he said, "If anyone ever tries to use your story against you, let me be the first to stand in their way." Calla smiled, not a wide one, just enough to say she heard him, trusted him, needed him. He didn't know it then, but that night marked a shift, not in how he saw her, but in how he saw himself. He had started as the man with power, with answers, with control. Now he was the man who had something to lose, and for the first time in his life, that didn't terrify him. It made him feel alive. The week after that night felt different. There were no declarations, no dramatic changes in how they moved around each other, but something had shifted, permanently, like a new current running just beneath the surface. Julius still sent his car for her when events required her presence. She still wore the dresses his assistant chose, still played the role, still smiled just enough for the photographers without ever pretending it was real. Except, now, it was. Behind the shared glances, the gentle touches that lingered a little too long, and the stolen minutes in corners no one noticed, it was no longer an act. At a charity auction hosted at a historic museum, Julia stood on stage, delivering a speech about resilience and rebuilding. Calla watched from a table near the front, fingers tracing the rim of her water glass. Her dress was simple, emerald green, fitted at the waist, modest at the neckline. She looked like she belonged there, even though she still felt like she didn't. Julius caught her eye once while speaking, just a flicker, but it was enough to ground him. When the applause broke out, she was the only one who didn't clap immediately. She was still watching him, not as a billionaire, but as a man. Afterward, he approached her in the shadowed hallway leading to the private exhibit rooms. You didn't clap, he said. She tilted her head. You didn't need it. He stepped closer. What do I need then? She looked up at him, eyes calm. Someone who stays when the speech ends. He didn't reply. He just reached for her hand, gently, like a secret being passed between them. That night, he didn't return to the penthouse alone. They didn't even speak as the driver took them through the city. She leaned her head against the window. He kept glancing at her reflection. When they arrived, he opened her door, waited for her to exit, then walked beside her in silence. Inside, the lights were low, the space sterile but beautiful. Still, she softened it just by being in it. She took her shoes off the moment they walked in, left them near the door, padded barefoot into the living room. Julius watched her, still in his suit, as if unsure whether to follow or keep his distance. She turned. Do you always stand like that after letting someone in? Like what? Like you're still deciding if you made a mistake. He didn't smile, but he stepped forward. I know it wasn't. Later, they stood on the balcony, city lights pulsing below them. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. He offered his jacket. She didn't take it. I want to feel something, she said, even if it stings. His voice was low. What are you afraid of, Calla? She turned her face toward him. That this will end the same way everything else did, with silence, with someone deciding I'm too complicated, too scarred, too much. He moved closer. You're not too much. You're the first thing in a long time that actually makes sense. The words weren't poetic, they weren't rehearsed, but she believed him. Inside, the space between them closed again, only this time it was heavier, loaded. They reached for each other like people not trying to fix anything, just feel it fully before it slipped away. She undressed him slowly, memorizing every inch like she wanted to know the man beneath the structure, the boy beneath the suit. He undressed her carefully, no urgency, no performance, just reverence. They didn't speak as they moved through each layer of closeness. The only sound was breath and the low hum of the city beyond the glass. Afterward, they lay there for a long time, her fingers tracing a line down his chest, his eyes following the motion. You never asked me what I wanted, she said. He didn't move. Tell me now. I want to be chosen, she whispered. Not protected, not pitied. Chosen. His hand found hers. You are. But outside that room, a different story was unfolding. A photo had surfaced online. Calla leaving the penthouse 3 nights earlier. Blurry, but clear enough. The internet did what it always did. Comment sections filled with speculation. Headlines hinted at scandal. The girl with a past and the man with a fortune. Investors began asking questions. His PR team panicked. His communications director scheduled a meeting. By the next morning, Julius had 10 missed calls from his board, 2 legal memos, and a warning email titled Potential Risk to Reputation. When he walked into the boardroom, they were already waiting. Men in suits, women in diamonds, all of them armed with fake concern. The chairman spoke first. We're not telling you how to live your life, Julius, but this affects perception. Another voice added, it's not just about you anymore. It's the company, the image, the brand. He said nothing at first. He sat down, calm, composed. Then he leaned forward. Let me make something clear. I built this company, from numbers, from risk, from knowing what mattered and what didn't. But if any of you think I will cut a person out of my life because she doesn't fit your press narrative, you're mistaken. The room shifted. Someone tried to push again. What if this escalates? He stood. Then I let it, but I won't abandon her. Later that day, Calla sat alone in her apartment, scrolling through her phone. The headlines hadn't stopped. Her name wasn't used, but the descriptions were too specific. Tattooed woman with a controversial past. Nightlife performer linked to billionaire? She turned off the screen, exhaled, looked at the scar on her arm and whispered, "Not again." She began packing, slowly, no tears, just clothes, just books, just silence. When Julius arrived hours later, the door was open, the lights dim. She stood in the middle of the room with her bag at her feet. "You're leaving," he said. She nodded. "You're a storm, Julius. I don't want to be the one it breaks." He stepped closer. "Then let me be the one it shelters." She looked at him, eyes wet, but voice firm. "You don't get to protect me by hiding me. You either love me out loud or not at all." He said nothing, for a long time. Then he turned and walked out. Not because he was giving up, but because he had something to prove. The next day, at a press event, with cameras rolling and microphones pointed, Julius Vance stood before the world and said, "I'm not here to discuss market expansion. I'm here to address something more important. The woman you're all whispering about. Her name is Calla Moreno. She is not my mistake. She is my choice. And if that costs me your support, I accept it." The silence that followed was deafening. But Calla, watching from her small apartment, smiled. A slow, quiet, tearful smile. Because he chose her, not in secret, but in front of everyone. The press didn't take long. Within hours of Julius's public declaration, headlines swarmed every news site. Some praised his candor, others called it reckless. Investors were split. The market dipped slightly, rumors flared, the narrative twisted in every direction. But Julius didn't respond. He didn't retract a word. For the first time in years, he let the chaos rise and didn't try to contain it. Instead, he sent one message to her. 4 words: "Still choosing you. Always." But Calla didn't reply. She had left the city the next morning. No announcement, no note, just a forwarded email to his assistant with a short message. "I need space. Tell him I'm okay." Julius read it once, then again. He stared at the screen until it blurred, then shut the laptop without a word. He didn't sleep that night, or the next. He functioned just enough. Meetings, documents, appearances, but he wasn't present. His thoughts always drifted to her, where she was, if she'd eaten, if she still wore his shirt when she couldn't sleep. Days passed, then weeks. The press found a new scandal. Investors calmed. The market stabilized, but he didn't. Every room felt too big, every morning too quiet. Then, one afternoon, his driver handed him an envelope. No name, no return address. Inside was a photo. Calla, barefoot, sitting on the porch of a small house somewhere far from New York. Hair messy, knees drawn to her chest, a book open on her lap. She looked peaceful, but not whole. The note with it read, "You can't fix what you don't understand." Julius knew what it meant. She hadn't left because she was afraid. She left because she needed to see who she was without him. She needed to prove, to herself, that she was more than what he made her feel. And if he wanted her back, he'd have to meet her where she was. Not in power, not in protection, in truth. So he went. He left the board in the hands of his most trusted VP. Told the press he was taking a sabbatical. Then he followed the trail. Credit card pings, license plate readers, quiet favors from people he rarely asked for anything. It took him 4 days. He found her in a small lakeside town in Vermont. The house was modest, quiet, wrapped in ivy and chipped paint. Her name was on the mailbox, written in faded marker. He stood at the gate for a long time before knocking. When she opened the door, she didn't speak. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just looked at him. He looked back, then said, "You were right. I didn't understand. Not fully. Not what it meant to stand beside you instead of trying to shield you. I said I chose you, but I still made it about me." Still, she said nothing. He continued, You asked me once if I'd still want you after hearing your truth, but I never told you mine. She folded her arms across her chest. Then tell me. And he did. He told her about Caroline, about the night she called him and he didn't pick up, about the voicemail he deleted without listening to, about the guilt that sat in his lungs like stone ever since. She needed someone to hear her, he said, and I was too busy being important. Cala's eyes didn't leave his. I thought if I could control everything, I'd never lose anyone again, he added. But I was wrong. I almost lost you. Her voice was quiet. Why now? Because I stopped trying to be the man who wins, he said, and started trying to be the one who stays. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was healing. She stepped aside, let him in. They didn't touch that night, didn't rush. They talked. About nothing. About everything. He asked her what she was reading. She told him it was poetry. He said he wanted to hear her favorite line. She read it aloud. Some hearts are built like shelters, not palaces. He said, That's you. She whispered, And maybe that's enough. Over the next few days, they found a rhythm. Morning walks by the lake, shared coffee, long talks by the fire. He fixed the back porch. She painted the mailbox. They didn't talk about returning. Not yet. They just lived. Then came the letter. From her old agency. It was formal, cold. A reminder that her reputation had cost her professional opportunities. That the photo scandal still followed her. That other women in her position were losing work because of her visibility. She read it twice, then folded it, then burned it in the fireplace. Julius watched her do it, then said, You could come back. With me. Start again. She looked at him. And be defined by who I'm with again? No, he said. This time I'd stand behind you, not in front. She considered. I don't need saving, Julius. I know, he replied. But maybe we save each other. And she nodded. They returned quietly. No press release, no reappearance at high society events. Instead, Julius held a private meeting with his board, told them he was launching a new foundation, one focused on rehabilitation and advocacy for women who had survived trauma. He named it the Caroline Project. He appointed Cala as its director, gave her full creative control. When she walked into the boardroom for the first time, she wore no makeup, no designer suit, just her presence, and it was enough. She stood in front of men who once whispered about her in hallways and said, You don't have to understand my story. You just have to stop using it as a reason to keep me out of the room. And they listened. Because Julius listened. And he backed her. Every word, every plan. 6 months later, the foundation opened its first center. On opening day, Cala stood at the podium, her scar visible beneath a sleeveless blouse. She didn't hide, she didn't flinch. Julius stood beside her, not in front, just a man who had learned how to be soft without losing strength. That night, on the rooftop of the building, with the city lights blinking like quiet applause, she turned to him and said, I'm not afraid anymore. He looked at her. Of what? Of being loved for who I really am. And he smiled. Then let's start there. Autumn rolled in slowly, painting the city in gold and rust. The days got shorter, but neither of them noticed. They were too busy building something real, not a fantasy, not a secret, just a life. Julius still worked, but less. He left the office by 6, answered fewer calls after dark. Cala spent most of her time at the foundation, working with survivors, overseeing projects, building a team. She never used his name to open doors. She didn't have to. Her presence did that. Some days were still hard. There were moments when she flinched at loud noises, when he stared too long at his sister's photo. But they didn't hide from those cracks anymore. They made room for them. They learned how to speak gently, how to leave space, how to apologize when silence said too much. One evening, while watching the rain from their shared apartment, Calla turned to him and asked, "Do you think it was worth it? The press, the fallout, the fight?" He didn't hesitate. Every second. She leaned into him. "I'm not perfect, Julius. I still carry the weight." He kissed the top of her head. "Then I'll carry it with you." There was no wedding announcement, no dramatic proposal, just a shared morning where they both reached for the same coffee mug and laughed. Just a Tuesday where Julius quietly slid a simple ring across the table and said, "Only if you want to." She did, not because he completed her, but because he didn't try to. On the day they signed the papers, there were no guests, no flowers, just her in a white blouse, him in rolled-up sleeves. The official asked, "Do you take—" But Julius cut in. "I already do." Calla smirked. "You're always interrupting." He took her hand. "And you're always giving me something worth interrupting for." Their vows were simple, honest, not about forever, about trying, choosing, listening. Later that night, on the rooftop where it all began, Calla stood by the railing looking out. Julius wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You know," she said, "I used to think love looked like grand gestures, like being rescued." "And now?" he asked. She turned. "Now I know it looks like this, showing up, staying when it's inconvenient, saying nothing when silence is safer, but doing it anyway." He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. "You didn't tempt me," he said. "You terrified me." "Because I undressed in front of you?" "No," he whispered, "because you didn't try to hide." She smiled, a quiet, slow thing. Sometimes a mistake is the best beginning. And they stood there, beneath a sky smeared with stars, two people who were never supposed to meet, who almost walked away but chose instead to stay. Not for a perfect ending, but for something better, something real.
A sleek luxury hotel towered high above the bustling streets of New York City, its glass facade glistening under the evening lights. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with quiet elegance as VIP guests roamed the grand halls of the Plaza Meridian Hotel. Hidden among the lavish interiors, Emma Rivera, a 27-year-old hotel maid, carried the weight of responsibility on her slender shoulders. Life hadn't been kind to Emma. After losing her father at a young age, she became the sole provider for her family. Her mother, Maria Rivera, a former home care nurse, was now battling chronic illness. Emma's younger sister, Sophia, was in college with dreams of becoming a nurse like their mother. With medical bills piling up and tuition deadlines looming, Emma's life had become a never-ending cycle of double shifts and sleepless nights, each day blurring into the next as she fought to keep her family afloat. The weight of her responsibilities pressed down like a shadow she could never escape. Meanwhile, Ethan Clark, the CEO of Clark Global Investments, had just returned to New York after a high-stakes business trip in London. Known for his precision and quiet dominance on Wall Street, Ethan was often referred to as the silent strategist. However, beneath his well-crafted persona of control and power, Ethan carried a burden that few could understand. An aching loneliness that not even the most extravagant success could fill. Returning to New York only reminded him of how empty his world had become. Their worlds seemed destined never to collide. But one fateful night, an exhausted Emma would fall asleep in the presidential suite she was assigned to clean, and everything would change. Two lives on vastly different paths were about to intersect, raising a question that neither of them had dared to ask. Could love cross the boundaries of wealth and status? The clock struck close to midnight as a warm, golden glow illuminated the grand presidential suite of the Plaza Meridian Hotel. Emma Rivera quietly pushed her cleaning cart into the room, her swollen, tired eyes struggling to stay open. This was the final task in her grueling double shift. "Just one more room," she whispered to herself, trying to keep her focus. The room was a masterpiece of opulence. Polished oak walls framed expansive floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of New York City. The marble floors shimmered under the light of a crystal chandelier. Yet none of this splendor could distract Emma from the thoughts weighing heavily on her mind. Her mother's medical expenses were overdue, and her sister Sophia's tuition payment was fast approaching. Emma moved around the suite with practiced efficiency, each step feeling heavier than the last as exhaustion clouded her senses. After tidying the enormous bed at the center of the room, she finally gave in to her fatigue. Sinking into a nearby armchair, she told herself it would only be for a few minutes. Within seconds, she fell into a deep sleep. Not long after, the door to the suite opened quietly. Ethan Clark entered, his expression weary from a long transatlantic flight. He didn't expect to find anyone inside, let alone a woman in a hotel uniform asleep in his room. For a moment, Ethan froze, surprised by the sight before him. His first instinct was to call security, but something stopped him. The young woman looked different. Even in sleep, her features reflected a quiet intensity, as if the burdens of life refused to leave her in peace. Ethan approached and noticed the slight creases on her uniform. Instead of reacting with anger, he reached for the cashmere throw on the nearby sofa and gently draped it over her shoulders. The subtle movement caused Emma to stir. Her eyes fluttered open and immediately locked onto Ethan's. For a brief moment, time stood still, but reality quickly hit. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," Emma gasped, bolting upright. The blanket slid to the floor as panic surged through her veins. "I didn't mean to, I was resting for a moment. Please, I can't lose this job. I need it." Ethan raised a hand, signaling for her to calm down. His voice was low but commanding. "Take a breath. It's not as bad as you think." Emma stood frozen, her heart racing. This wasn't just any hotel guest. She recognized him from business magazines. Ethan Clark, one of the most powerful executives in New York. Emma stood there, still in shock, as Ethan calmly picked up the blanket and placed it back on the chair. He made no accusations, which only confused her further. He broke the silence. "Am I right?" he asked after glancing at her name tag. "Yes, sir. I sincerely apologize. This won't happen again." "Stop apologizing. I'm just curious. What makes someone work themselves to the point of exhaustion like this?" Ethan's voice was gentle but probing. Emma hesitated. She didn't want to share too much of her personal life. But there was something in his eyes. Genuine interest and concern. After a few seconds, she sighed and decided to answer truthfully. "My mom is sick. My sister is in college. They depend on me. I don't have a choice but to keep working these long hours." Ethan didn't press further, but something in her words stirred a memory deep within him. He understood all too well the weight of being the one others depended on. His expression softened with quiet empathy. He understood family burdens all too well. Losing his parents in a car accident at a young age, he had grown up under the strict mentorship of his grandfather. His entire life had been about building a legacy alone. "Sounds like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," Ethan remarked softly. Emma gave a faint smile. "I just do what I have to do." From that night on, Ethan found himself thinking about Emma more often than he expected. He began visiting the hotel frequently, especially the VIP lounge area, hoping for another chance to talk to her. Though Emma tried to maintain a professional distance, she couldn't deny that Ethan's presence was comforting. He genuinely listened when she spoke. One evening, after her shift, Ethan invited Emma to take a walk on the hotel's rooftop garden. The soft rustling of leaves and the gentle hum of distant traffic created a calming atmosphere. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emma allowed herself to relax, the tension in her shoulders easing under the serene night sky. "You're not what I expected," Emma said, breaking the silence. "Oh, and what did you expect?" Ethan chuckled softly. "Someone rich, cold, and only concerned with work and money," Emma admitted bluntly. "Sounds like I'm terrifying," Ethan replied with a teasing smirk, but then his voice softened. "What if I told you that, despite everything I have, I've never felt more alone?" Emma blinked in surprise. He continued, sharing stories about his past and the isolation that came with his success. In that moment, they both felt a deep connection forming between them. Over time, these coincidental meetings became routine. The way Ethan looked at Emma and his subtle gestures of care began to stir feelings in her heart, yet neither of them spoke of their growing affection aloud. Everything, however, was about to change when a paparazzo captured a photo of them together during one of their rooftop walks. The next day, photos of Emma and Ethan walking together on the hotel rooftop spread like wildfire across gossip websites. Headlines like, "CEO Ethan Clarke's secret romance with a hotel maid" dominated the tabloids. Reporters wasted no time ridiculing Emma, painting her as a gold digger, while portraying Ethan as a man struggling under the pressures of his career. Whispers filled the hotel corridors. Staff members and VIP guests began casting judgmental glances Emma's way. Each step she took seemed weighed down by the scrutiny of dozens of eyes. Conversations halted abruptly whenever she entered a room. The tension reached its peak when Isabella Harrington, an old friend and former business partner of Ethan's, made a surprise appearance at the hotel. With an air of effortless confidence, Isabella strolled into the VIP lounge and headed straight for Emma. "Emma Rivera, right? I'm Isabella Harrington," she introduced herself with a thin, condescending smile. "I think we should have a chat." Emma maintained her professionalism, keeping her tone polite. "How can I help you?" "Oh, just some friendly advice," Isabella replied smoothly, her voice laced with subtle malice. "People like us don't take temporary distractions seriously." A chill ran down Emma's spine. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean," she said, trying to stay composed. Isabella chuckled softly. "Oh, I think you understand perfectly," Isabella said with a patronizing smile. "Ethan and I have a history. Do you honestly believe that someone like you can belong in his world after just a few fleeting encounters? Men like him always return to their own kind." Her words cut deep, each one a painful reminder of the vast chasm between Emma's world and Ethan's. Emma stood frozen as Isabella flashed one last smug smile and walked away. That evening, Emma sat in her small apartment, staring at her phone. Messages from Ethan kept appearing, but she couldn't bring herself to reply. Isabella's words echoed endlessly in her mind. Emma didn't want to be the reason Ethan's reputation or career was tarnished by scandal. After hours of reflection, she made a decision she believed was for the best: to distance herself from Ethan and protect him from further damage. After deciding to distance herself from Ethan, Emma focused solely on her work. However, she was unexpectedly summoned by hotel management and asked to attend an important dinner with the Chin Group from Singapore. Patricia Martinez, Emma's supervisor, explained that Ethan had specifically requested her to serve as a cultural advisor for the event. That evening, Emma walked into the hotel's grand dining room with a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. The atmosphere was formal and tense as members of the Chen family, especially Madame Chen, the elder matriarch and the most influential figure, were welcomed. Ethan greeted Emma with a grateful look, but didn't pressure her to speak. The dinner proceeded smoothly until Madame Chen broke the silence with a direct question. "Emma, tell me about your family." Emma froze for a moment, startled. All eyes were now on her. She could feel Ethan tense beside her. He knew how much the Chen Group valued family and sincerity. If Emma couldn't provide a convincing answer, the entire deal could be jeopardized. Taking a deep breath, Emma began to speak. "My father passed away when I was young. My mother, Maria Rivera, raised my sister and me on her own. Despite facing many hardships, she always taught us that true wealth lies in how you treat others, not in what you own." Emma continued, sharing stories of her mother's sacrifices and how those lessons shaped her life. She emphasized that, for her, responsibility wasn't just an obligation. It was a way of protecting the people she loved. Her heartfelt words filled the room with a respectful silence. Madame Chen's sharp gaze softened, her skepticism replaced by admiration. After a brief pause, she turned to Ethan and said, "You have chosen well. She understands something many in your position often forget. Business without heart is just numbers on paper." The tension dissolved instantly. The Chen family members became more relaxed, engaging in further discussions about their collaboration plans. Ethan let out a quiet sigh of relief. Thanks to Emma's story, the trust between the two sides had been solidified, ensuring the success of the partnership. After the dinner, once the guests had departed, Ethan turned to Emma and said softly, "You saved me tonight. I don't even know how to thank you." "I just did what needed to be done," Emma replied quietly, though a strange sense of warmth blossomed within her. In that moment, Emma realized that she and Ethan shared a bond that transcended the boundaries of their worlds. Camera flashes lit up the press conference room as Ethan Clark faced the media with unwavering confidence. Rumors about his relationship with Emma Rivera had dominated headlines, but tonight, Ethan was determined to set the record straight. Not just to protect Emma, but to redefine the future of his company. "These rumors mean nothing," Ethan stated firmly. "What matters are the values we stand for: integrity, empathy, and responsibility to the community." He went on to announce a company restructuring, including plans to collaborate with professionals like Emma's mother, Maria Rivera, to develop community healthcare initiatives. Ethan emphasized that Clark Global Investments was committed to supporting underserved families. After the press conference, Ethan invited Emma to the rooftop garden of the hotel, a place that had become significant to both of them. The cool evening breeze rustled the plants, and the lights of the city shimmered in the distance like stars. Emma crossed her arms, trying to steady herself. She knew Ethan had something important to say, but the wounds left by societal judgment and Isabella's cruel words still lingered. "Emma," Ethan began softly, stepping closer to her. His eyes held a depth of sincerity that made her heart ache. "I owe you more than just a thank you, not only for what you did during the Chen Group dinner, but for showing me what truly matters in life." Emma remained silent, her mind racing. There was no trace of the aloof businessman she had once met. In his gaze, she saw a man who had stripped away his armor. "I don't just want you in my life," Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I need you, not for what you do, but for who you are. Your strength, your kindness, and your heart, you make me want to be a better man." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. His words shattered the walls she had built around herself, yet fear still clung to her. "Then we'll have to face so much," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me." "There's nothing worth having if I can't live authentically," Ethan said firmly. "You've taught me that. Love isn't something I need to hide. I want us to face everything together." Slowly, Ethan knelt and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The rooftop lights reflected off the elegant ring inside. "Emma Rivera, will you marry me?" Emma gasped, her hand covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. In that moment, all the fear and doubt melted away. She could hear nothing but her heartbeat and Ethan's earnest words. Tears streamed down Emma's face as her heart swelled with an overwhelming mix of relief and happiness. "Yes, yes, I will," she cried, her voice trembling with joy. At that moment, all her fears melted away, replaced by the certainty that they would face the future together. Ethan stood and gently slipped the ring onto her finger. He smiled, his eyes glowing with pure affection. Applause and cheers suddenly erupted from the entrance. Sophia, Maria, and a few familiar faces stepped forward. Sophia waved her phone excitedly. "I got it all on video." Emma laughed through her tears. Maria approached and took her hand gently. "My little girl has finally found her happiness," she whispered, her eyes brimming with pride and love. Ethan squeezed Emma's hand as they both gazed toward the distant skyline. They knew challenges still lay ahead, but now they would face them together. Alexander Reed, a young billionaire and the owner of one of the most luxurious hotel chains in the world. With wealth and success at his fingertips, he had everything, except the peace he craved after long, exhausting days. One night, after finishing an important meeting, Alexander returned to his private penthouse inside his hotel, expecting a quiet and relaxing evening. But as he stepped into his bathroom, he froze. A young woman was fast asleep on his toilet seat. Instead of anger, curiosity sparked in him. Who was she? Why was she here? And most importantly, why did this ridiculous sight make him want to laugh instead of rage? Alexander had no idea that this bizarre encounter would change his life forever. Emma Carter, a housekeeping staff at Reed Empire Hotel, was utterly exhausted. Covering a night shift for her lazy coworker, she had spent the past week running on fumes. Her eyes burned, her limbs ached, and all she wanted was to finish her final task, cleaning the hotel owner's penthouse. The opulence of the room left her speechless. Crystal chandeliers sparkled against floor-to-ceiling windows, every surface gleamed, and the bathroom was so massive it could fit her entire apartment. "This isn't a hotel, it's a palace," Emma mumbled as she started scrubbing. But as she bent over to clean the bathtub, a sudden wave of exhaustion hit her. "Just 5 seconds," she thought, resting her head against her arm, and just like that, she fell asleep, right on top of the toilet seat. The moment Alexander walked into the bathroom, he nearly screamed. "What the hell?" Emma jolted awake, panicked, and tumbled onto the floor, knocking over the mop bucket. Standing before her was a tall man, his shirt unbuttoned, his expression a mix of shock and fury. "Who are you, and why are you sleeping in my bathroom?" Emma stammered, desperately trying to explain, but every word only made things worse. Meanwhile, Alexander wasn't sure whether to be outraged or just laugh at the absurdity of it all. Emma sat on the floor, heart pounding, staring up at Alexander in panic. "I didn't steal anything, she swallowed hard. "I just fell asleep." Alexander crossed his arms, frowning. "Fell asleep? In my bathroom?" Emma hurriedly explained her exhausting work schedule, expecting anger, expecting him to fire her on the spot, but instead of rage, Alexander suddenly paused, sniffing the air. He turned, grabbed a coffee cup from the counter, and held it out to her. "Do you drink coffee?" Emma frowned. "Yes, but this one smells." She stopped, took a whiff, and cringed. Burnt. The beans were over-roasted, making it overly bitter. Someone tried to fix it with sugar, but that only made it worse. Alexander blinked. "You figured all that out just from the smell?" Emma nodded, slightly confused. "Doesn't everyone?" Alexander chuckled, but instead of mocking her, his eyes gleamed with intrigue. "No, they don't." He set the cup down and studied her like he had just found a hidden gem. "Follow me." Confused, Emma stood up and followed Alexander down to the hotel's main kitchen. Inside, a team of chefs was busy preparing breakfast. Marco Vasquez, the hotel's esteemed head chef, scowled when he saw Emma. "What's she doing here?" Marco asked, his tone laced with irritation. Alexander gestured toward Emma. "She can tell what's wrong with food just by smelling it. Let her taste today's breakfast." Emma's eyes widened. "Wait, I'm just a housekeeper." "Not anymore," Alexander said smoothly. "Today, you're a food critic." Marco smirked, arms crossed. "All right then, kid, go ahead." Emma picked up a fork, took a deep breath, and bit into the scrambled eggs. Immediately, she grimaced. "Too dry. You used low-quality butter, and the salt is off." Marco raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah?" Emma grabbed a piece of bread and frowned. "This isn't fresh. Either it was baked yesterday or stored improperly." She sipped the orange juice and nearly choked. "Oh my God. Who mixed fresh juice with store-bought and thought it was a good idea?" Alexander burst into laughter. Marco, though reluctant, had to admit she was right. Seems like the girl actually knows what she's talking about." Alexander turned to Emma, a victorious smile on his lips. "I knew it." And that was the moment Emma Carter, a mere housekeeper, suddenly became the most important person in the hotel kitchen. Emma still couldn't believe what was happening. Just a week ago, she was a struggling housekeeper drowning in bills. Now, she was sitting in the first-class cabin of a private jet, flying to Paris with Alexander Reed, the arrogant billionaire who had somehow turned her life upside down. "I still don't understand why I'm here," Emma muttered, staring out the window as clouds drifted by. Alexander, sipping a glass of wine, simply shrugged. "You have talent, Carter, and if I want to learn more about it, I'll take you to the best place. Paris, the culinary capital of the world." Emma swallowed hard. She might have impressed a few people at the hotel, but Paris was a whole different level. At the extravagant food event, Emma quickly realized she was out of place. The room was filled with renowned chefs, powerful business moguls, and influential critics. The looks she received ranged from curiosity to open disdain. And no one made their opinion clearer than Isabelle Laurent, a strikingly beautiful and powerful businesswoman who had once been close to Alexander. "Alexander, you never cease to surprise me," Isabelle smiled, her gaze sweeping over Emma with thinly veiled condescension. "I didn't think you enjoyed traveling with this kind of company." Emma clenched her fists. Alexander's expression remained unreadable. "Emma isn't just a guest. She's the only person I trust when it comes to evaluating quality." Isabelle arched an eyebrow, intrigued yet doubtful. She picked up a wine glass and handed it to Emma. "If you're as talented as he says, why don't you prove it?" Isabelle challenged, her smile smug. "Can you guess what kind of wine this is?" Emma took a deep breath, lifted the glass and inhaled. The aroma was rich, bold, with hints of oak and subtle fruity notes. She took a sip, letting the flavors settle on her tongue, analyzing each layer. Setting the glass down, she spoke confidently. This was aged in oak barrels with a light fruitiness. Definitely a young Bordeaux, around 3 years old. Silence. Isabelle blinked. A nearby sommelier nodded in confirmation. "She's correct." Alexander smirked. "She always is." Emma met Isabelle's gaze and saw the flicker of irritation in her eyes. But for the first time, it didn't matter. She had just proven she wasn't some clueless outsider. Emma thought things would get easier after proving her talent. She was wrong. The next morning, as she stepped into the hotel lobby, she felt dozens of eyes on her. Some people whispered, others smirked. A chill ran down her spine. Her phone buzzed, a message from Carla, her friend back at the hotel. "Emma, have you seen the news?" Frowning, Emma opened her browser, and the moment she saw the headline, her stomach dropped. "Billionaire Alexander Reed involved with hotel housekeeper. Suspicious relationship uncovered." The article was accompanied by a photo of her and Alexander at last night's event, alongside countless speculations that she wasn't being valued for her skills, but for something far more scandalous. Emma felt frozen in place. Before she could even think about what to do, Alexander appeared. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. "Come with me," he said, his voice low yet commanding. Emma barely had time to react before he led her into a private conference room where a team of PR specialists and executives were waiting. "We're shutting this rumor down immediately," Alexander declared, taking a seat, his sharp gaze fixed on the article displayed on a large screen. Emma hesitated. "What are you going to do?" He crossed his arms. "I'm holding a press conference." Her eyes widened. "They won't believe you. They just want a scandal." Alexander smirked. "I don't need them to believe me. I just need them to know the truth." A few hours later, inside the hotel's grand conference hall, the press was already gathered, cameras flashing as Alexander stepped onto the stage. "I'm sure you've all seen the headlines," he began, his voice calm but authoritative. "So let me set the record straight." Silence fell over the room. "Emma Carter is not here because of any relationship with me. She's here because she's talented. And if any of you doubt that, feel free to test her yourselves." Emma stared at him, her heart pounding. He wasn't just defending her. He was placing his full confidence in her abilities. Rumors spread fast. But this time, the truth was even stronger. The press conference ended, but long after the cameras stopped flashing, Emma couldn't shake the unease creeping into her heart. That night, as she stood on the balcony of her hotel room, gazing at the dazzling Paris skyline, a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "What's on your mind, Carter?" She turned to see Alexander leaning against the doorway, a glass of wine in hand. Emma took a deep breath, wrestling with the emotions inside her. "I'm just wondering, why are you doing all of this for me?" Alexander studied her for a moment before stepping closer. "Because you deserve it." Her heart skipped a beat. "Not because you feel responsible for me?" A small smirk played on his lips as he set his glass down and met her gaze. "If it was just responsibility, I wouldn't care this much." The silence between them grew heavier, not awkward, but charged. "Emma," Alexander murmured, his voice lower, more certain. You're the only person who's ever made me break all my own rules." Emma inhaled sharply, her breath catching. She had spent her whole life running from things that could hurt her, but this time she didn't want to run. Before she could overthink, she stepped forward, grasping the fabric of his shirt, pulling him down closer. And for the first time, they kissed. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't hesitant. It was the answer to every unspoken question between them. After their first kiss, everything between Emma and Alexander shifted. The sharp remarks, the unspoken distance between a billionaire and a housekeeper, none of it mattered anymore. Now they were just two people learning how to care for each other. The next morning, Alexander pulled Emma out of the hotel, determined to show her the true magic of Paris. "You know," Emma said, laughing as she peeked into a pastry shop, "I've never had a real macaron before." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "You've been in Paris for nearly a week and haven't tried one? That's criminal." 5 minutes later, they were sitting by the Seine, a box of colorful macarons between them. Emma took a bite, her eyes widening. "Oh my God, is this what heaven tastes like?" Alexander chuckled, resting his chin on his hand as he watched her. "You're easier to impress than I expected." The morning passed with laughter, light touches, and lingering glances that said more than words ever could. Alexander was no longer the untouchable billionaire, and Emma no longer felt like an outsider. As the sun set, they strolled along the Champs-Élysées. Emma casually looped her arm through Alexander's as if she had done it 100 times before. "Do you regret coming to Paris?" Alexander asked. Emma leaned against his shoulder, smiling. "No, and I think I've never been this happy." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. He knew then he had never met anyone like Emma before, and for the first time in his life, he didn't care about any rules, only her. Paris had changed everything, but real life awaited them in New York, where the true test of their relationship would begin. Emma was no longer an anonymous housekeeper. Now she was Reed Empire Hotel's lead food consultant, attending high-profile events and working alongside Alexander to elevate the hotel's culinary excellence. But more than anything, the distance between them had vanished. 3 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, Alexander told her to keep the day free, but refused to say why. They wandered through the glowing city streets, visited a cafe where Emma had once dreamed of tasting an overpriced pastry, and finally, as night fell, Alexander led her onto a helicopter. "What are you up to?" Emma laughed, her heart pounding as they soared above the glittering skyline. Alexander smirked. "Wait and see." As the helicopter hovered over a secluded riverside park, Emma's breath caught in her throat. The area below, once dark and empty, suddenly lit up, but not with traditional lights. Hundreds of drones began to rise from the ground, forming dazzling golden patterns against the sky. One by one, they moved in perfect synchrony, aligning into glowing letters. Emma's eyes widened in shock as the lights shifted into 3 simple yet life-changing words. "Marry me?" Her breath hitched. She barely had time to process before Alexander gently tugged her hand, making her turn toward him. And then she saw it. Alexander was no longer sitting. He was kneeling. Right there, inside the helicopter, his steady hands holding a velvet box, a breathtaking ring glistening inside. Emma Carter, his voice, usually firm and commanding, now carried a rare tenderness. "From the moment you crashed, quite literally, into my life, nothing has been the same. You challenge me, frustrate me, and somehow make everything make sense." Emma let out a shaky laugh, her vision blurring with unshed tears. Alexander opened the velvet box, revealing a ring that shimmered like the stars above them. "I don't just want you in my life, I need you. You are the only rule I am willing to break, the only risk I am willing to take. So, Emma, will you make this chaos permanent and marry me?" Tears finally spilled over as Emma covered her mouth, nodding frantically before whispering, "Yes, 1,000,000 times yes." As Alexander slid the ring onto her trembling finger, a final wave of drones ascended into the sky, forming a heart shape before dissolving into a synchronized fireworks display. The night exploded in color, a grand celebration high above New York City. 2 weeks after the wedding, Emma stood in the bathroom, eyes locked on the pregnancy test in her hands. 2 lines. Her breath hitched. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She, someone who had spent her life just trying to survive, was about to become a mother. The door creaked open, and Alexander stepped inside, sleeves rolled up, looking relaxed. But the second he saw Emma's expression, his entire body tensed. "Emma?" He gently touched her shoulder. "What's wrong?" Emma turned to face him, hands trembling as she held up the test. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the pregnancy test. 2 lines. Clear as day. Her breath hitched. No way. No way. Just then, the bathroom door creaked open and Alexander stepped inside. He was mid-sentence, holding a newspaper, when he froze. "Emma, what's wrong?" She turned to him, her fingers gripping the test so tightly her knuckles turned white. Wordlessly, she held it up. Alexander took it, his eyes scanning over the small device, his mind taking a moment to catch up. Blink. Once, twice. His breath came out in a shaky exhale. We're having a baby?" Emma couldn't speak. She just nodded as a single tear slipped down her cheek. For a long second, Alexander didn't move. Then, as if reality crashed into him all at once, he let out a disbelieving laugh, one hand running through his hair. Then, without warning, he scooped Emma up into his arms, spinning her around, his laughter mixing with hers. "Emma," he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "You didn't just change my life. You gave it meaning." She smiled through her tears, pressing her hands to his cheeks. "Looks like you're stuck with me forever, Reed. And I wouldn't have it any other way." And for the first time in her life, she knew she had finally found where she truly belonged. Life has a strange way of connecting us with people and circumstances we never expected. This is the story of Marcus, a renowned but distant lawyer, and Emma, a dedicated teacher who once suffered because of him. Fate brought them together in a life-threatening moment, setting the stage for a journey of healing, redemption, and rediscovering the true meaning of life. When Marcus unexpectedly suffered a heart attack on his way to pick up his daughter Lily from school, he never imagined that the one who would come to his aid was someone he had wronged in the past. Despite her scars from their shared history, Emma chose kindness over resentment. From that moment, the lives of Marcus, Emma, and Lily began to change forever. Join us as we delve into this inspiring story about forgiveness, the power of compassion, and how unexpected connections can transform our lives. Marcus hurried through the bustling streets of the city, his eyes constantly checking his watch. He was late again to pick up Lily, his 10-year-old daughter, from school. The long hours at the office had consumed too much of his time, and now guilt gnawed at him as he thought of his daughter waiting. As he pulled into the school parking lot, Marcus felt a sharp pain in his chest. He stopped, gripping the steering wheel tightly, but dismissed it as the result of a stressful day. Taking a moment to steady himself, he stepped out of the car and rushed toward the school entrance. However, after just a few steps, the pain intensified. It felt as if a heavy weight was crushing his chest, making him stumble. His breathing quickened, his vision blurred, and Marcus collapsed onto the pavement as the few bystanders around him watched in alarm. Emma, a teacher at the school, was just leaving after a long day when she witnessed the scene. She immediately recognized Marcus, the man who had once ruined her career with an unjust accusation. For a brief moment, she hesitated, but her compassion overpowered her resentment. She rushed to his side, checking his vital signs, and shouted, "Someone call an ambulance!" From the school entrance, Lily emerged and saw her father lying motionless on the ground. She screamed, "Dad!" and ran toward him. Emma quickly stopped Lily, gently holding her back. "It's going to be okay," she said, her voice calm and reassuring. "The ambulance is on its way." In that chaotic moment, Emma not only stepped in to help Marcus, but also comforted Lily, who was terrified by the scene unfolding before her. When the ambulance arrived, Marcus was placed on a stretcher, unconscious. Lily tried to follow, but the paramedics held her back. Terrified, she turned to Emma, tears streaming down her face. "Are you coming with us?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. Emma hesitated. This wasn't her responsibility, but seeing Lily so frightened, she couldn't bring herself to leave. "All right, I'll go with you," she said, trying to keep her tone steady. At the hospital, Emma sat with Lily in the waiting room. She tried to distract the little girl with stories and simple games, but Lily alternated between complete silence and bouts of sobbing. Emma's heart ached as she watched Lily struggle to cope with her fear. Hours later, a doctor appeared with news. Marcus had suffered a severe heart attack and fallen into a coma. There was no telling when or if he would wake up. Emma learned that Marcus was a widower with no close relatives in the city. The hospital's social worker suggested placing Lily in temporary foster care, but the thought of leaving Lily alone in an unfamiliar environment was unbearable to Emma. In the end, Emma made a decision. "I'll take care of Lily," she told the social worker after a long pause. Memories of her past struggles flashed in her mind, the betrayal, the pain, the sleepless nights. But then she looked at Lily, standing there with tear-grilled eyes, and realized that this child needed her more than anything. Despite the lingering scars of her past, Emma knew she couldn't turn her back on Lily. Emma brought Lily to her small apartment in the suburbs. The apartment had just one bedroom and a tiny office, but Emma quickly transformed the office into a temporary room for Lily. While it wasn't as luxurious as Marcus's house, it offered warmth and safety. The first few nights were challenging. Lily often woke up from nightmares, calling for her father with tears streaming down her face. Emma would sit beside her, comforting her with stories and talking about their favorite books. Gradually, Lily would calm down and drift back to sleep. During the day, Emma tried to maintain a normal routine for Lily. She took her to school, helped with her homework, and cooked her favorite meals. On weekends, they painted and played games together, creating joyful moments that helped Lily forget her fears and grief. Over time, Lily began to trust Emma. One day, after visiting Marcus at the hospital, Lily held Emma's hand and said, "Thank you for taking care of me, Aunt Emma. I like you very much." Her innocent words melted Emma's heart. However, it wasn't always easy. Emma struggled with conflicting emotions. She still harbored resentment toward Marcus for the pain he had caused her, but she couldn't help feeling compassion for him and genuine love for Lily. Though her friends couldn't understand why Emma devoted so much time to the daughter of a man who had wronged her, Emma knew she couldn't abandon Lily. As the days passed, the bond between them grew stronger and deeper. 2 months later, Emma's phone buzzed. It was a call from the hospital. Marcus had woken up from his coma. She quickly informed Lily and brought her to the hospital. When Lily entered the hospital room, she immediately ran to her father's side. "Dad!" Lily cried out, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, though frail and thin, managed a weak smile and embraced his daughter tightly. Emma stood outside the door, giving them space for their reunion. A few hours later, a nurse came to find Emma. "Mr. Marcus wants to see you," she said. With her heart racing, Emma entered the hospital room. Marcus was sitting up in bed, his eyes filled with regret and gratitude. "Emma," he said, his voice hoarse from disuse, "I don't know how to thank you." Emma remained silent, unsure of how to respond. Marcus continued, "The nurse told me everything you did for Lily. You cared for her, gave her a home, and devoted your time to her. I don't deserve your kindness." With tears in his eyes, Marcus did something Emma never expected. He apologized. He admitted the mistakes of his past, the way he had treated her unfairly, and how his arrogance had caused her so much pain. To make amends, Marcus picked up a checkbook from the bedside table. "Name an amount," he said. "It's the least I can do to repay you." Emma glanced at the checkbook, then at Marcus. Memories of sleepless nights worrying about bills and losing her mother flashed through her mind. But after a moment, she turned to look at Lily, peacefully asleep on the chair beside her father. "No, Marcus," she said firmly, "I don't want your money. I did all this for Lily, not for you or any reward." Marcus was stunned, clearly not expecting this response. "But there must be something I can do," he insisted. Emma looked him straight in the eye. "There is one thing," she said. "Be a better father to Lily. She's an amazing child and deserves all your love and attention." Emma's words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. For the first time in his life, he felt completely disarmed by the truth. While still in the hospital, Marcus had plenty of time to reflect. At first, he tried to push the thoughts away, but Emma's words echoed relentlessly in his mind, forcing him to confront truths he had long ignored. He remembered how he treated people around him, using power and money to control everything, and how his arrogance and lack of empathy had caused so much pain, especially to Emma. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something unfamiliar: regret. Once discharged, Marcus began his journey of transformation. He spent more time with Lily, listening to her thoughts and joining her in activities she loved. One day, Marcus noticed Lily drawing and realized she had a natural talent for art. From that moment, he often sat down with her to draw, creating moments of joy and connection. Beyond his relationship with Lily, Marcus also made changes in how he managed his company and treated his employees. He implemented fairer policies, listened to their concerns, and treated them with respect. Those who once feared his power began to see a different Marcus, one who valued empathy and recognized the worth of others. With Emma, Marcus didn't try to express his gratitude through expensive gifts or material favors. Instead, he showed it through small but genuine gestures. He invited Emma to join father-daughter outings and always sought her input on Lily's education. Marcus treated Emma with sincere respect, no longer relying on his authority to dominate interactions. At first, Emma remained cautious, unsure if Marcus's changes were genuine. But over time, she began to see that his efforts were sincere. She started to see a different man, not the arrogant Marcus of the past, but a devoted father, and a person striving to right his wrongs. Months later, the lives of Marcus, Lily, and Emma had settled into a comfortable rhythm. They had become an unconventional family, bonded by their trials and their shared values of love and forgiveness. Marcus became involved in every aspect of Lily's life. He took her to art classes, attended her school performances, and often sat with her to draw or read. Lily had transformed into a happy, confident, and vibrant young girl. The three often had dinner together at Emma's apartment, talking about their days. Emma, who had grown used to solitude, now felt the warmth of family. She even smiled when Lily suggested adopting a puppy, and soon, Emma's small apartment was filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of tiny paws. One autumn afternoon, after dropping Lily off at her art class, Marcus and Emma stopped at a nearby park. They sat on a bench, watching golden leaves fall around them. Marcus suddenly spoke. "Emma, I know I don't deserve it, but do you think you could forgive me?" Emma looked into Marcus's eyes. They no longer held the arrogance of his past, but instead showed genuine remorse. After a moment of silence, she replied, "Marcus, I think I've already forgiven you. Holding on to resentment only hurt me. Forgiveness set me free." Marcus was overwhelmed with emotion. To him, her forgiveness was not just a relief, but a chance to start anew. On the one-year anniversary of Marcus's heart attack, the three of them sat on Emma's porch, watching the sunset. Lily played with her puppy while Marcus and Emma talked softly. "I never thought my life could change this much," Marcus said, smiling warmly. "And it's all thanks to you, Emma." Emma smiled back. "No, Marcus, you chose to change. I just helped you see that it was possible." They sat there in the glow of twilight, unsure of what the future would hold, but confident they could face anything together. Their journey was a testament to the power of forgiveness, love, and the ability to change for the better. A year and a half after the fateful day of Marcus's heart attack, his life with Emma and Lily had become closer than ever. Marcus was not only a devoted father, but also a steadfast companion to Emma. Together, the three had formed a true family, even if it wasn't official. One spring afternoon, as the three of them played in the park with their little dog, Marcus suddenly paused and said, "Emma, there's something I want to ask you." Emma looked at him, slightly surprised by the seriousness in his tone. Marcus reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box, and opened it to reveal a simple yet elegant ring. "Emma, you saved my life, brought joy to Lily, and completely changed my world. I can't imagine my life without you." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I've never felt this certain about anything in my life. Will you marry me?" Emma was overcome with emotion. Memories of the pain and struggles from the past flashed through her mind, but as she looked into Marcus's earnest eyes and thought of Lily, the child she loved as her own, she knew her answer. "Yes, Marcus, I will," she said, smiling through tears. Lily jumped up with excitement, hugging them both. As the ceremony concluded, Lily stepped forward with a hand-drawn card she had made. "This is for you," she said, holding it out to Emma and Marcus. The card read, "Thank you for being my family." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes as she hugged Lily tightly. "I love you, sweetheart," Emma whispered. Marcus knelt beside them, wrapping both in his arms. "And I love you both," he said, his voice filled with emotion. The wedding was simple yet heartfelt, attended by close friends, family, and even some of Marcus's former colleagues who had witnessed his incredible transformation. During his vows, Marcus turned to Emma, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Emma, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a second chance to be the man I was meant to be. Before I met you, I thought power and success were everything, but you showed me the true value of kindness, forgiveness, and love. You taught me how to be a better father, a better friend, and a better person. Today, I promise to honor the trust you placed in me, and to spend every day proving that your faith in me was not misplaced." The crowd fell silent, their hearts moved by his words. Emma, dressed in an elegant white gown, glowed as she stood beside Marcus, while Lily beamed with joy as their flower girl. After the ceremony, the three returned to the house they had decided to build together. It was not just a place to live, but a symbol of the love, forgiveness, and second chances life had given them. As the sun set, Marcus held Emma's hand, smiling as they watched Lily play nearby. "Thank you, Emma, for giving me not just a new life, but a family." Emma smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Thank you, Marcus, for choosing to change and for letting me be part of this journey." They sat together, basking in the peace of the present. Lily ran toward them, holding her puppy and laughing, her joy lighting up the evening sky. Marcus looked at Emma and whispered, "This is just the beginning. Together, we'll build a life full of love and memories." Emma smiled, her heart full of hope. They didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but they knew they would face it hand in hand as a family ready to embrace every moment together. The morning sun gently illuminated the clear waters of the canals, where gondolas drifted quietly, creating an almost otherworldly sense of peace. Maria Bennett stood before the towering iron gates of a Gothic mansion, her heart pounding in her chest. She tightened her grip on the strap of her worn backpack, her eyes reflecting a mix of hope and apprehension. Henry Lawson, the wealthy owner of the estate, had spent the past 2 years grieving the loss of his beloved wife. During that time, his only son, Ethan, just 7 years old, had withdrawn completely into silence, lost in a world of pain and solitude. Henry had tried everything, from child psychologists to speech therapists, but none had been able to help Ethan. In a final effort, he turned to a specialized support center, where they recommended Maria. Though Maria was mute, the center believed her ability to communicate through emotions and music could form a unique bond with Ethan. As the mansion's doors swung open, Mrs. Caldwell, Henry's longtime housekeeper, greeted Maria with a stern expression. "You're Maria Bennett?" she asked, her sharp gaze scanning her from head to toe. Maria nodded silently, offering a slight bow. "Remember," Mrs. Caldwell continued, "silence is the rule here. Do your job well and don't cause trouble." Maria stepped through the threshold, the chill of the vast but empty mansion washing over her. In her heart, she resolved that no matter how difficult the task, she would do everything in her power to help Ethan rediscover his voice and his smile. Maria stepped into the grand hall, where sunlight streamed through towering windows, casting shimmering patterns on the marble floor. The silence was so profound that Maria could hear her own footsteps echoing through the expansive corridors. Mrs. Caldwell, stern and commanding, led Maria through the mansion's long hallways. She pointed at various rooms, speaking briskly as if expecting no response. "The living room is here, the dining hall there, and that is Mr. Lawson's private wing. Stay out of it unless you're called." She stopped in front of a small door and opened it. "This is your room. Don't expect much. It's for the help." Maria looked into the modest space, furnished with a small bed, a rickety wardrobe, and a tiny window overlooking the inner courtyard. "Change into your uniform and be back in the kitchen in 5 minutes. Your first task awaits," Mrs. Caldwell instructed before leaving Maria alone. Maria changed into the plain gray uniform, feeling the unfamiliar fabric brush against her skin. She returned to the kitchen where Mrs. Caldwell was waiting. "You'll prepare breakfast for Master Ethan. toast with orange marmalade and fresh fruit. And remember, don't speak." "Oh, that's right, you can't." She smirked mockingly. Maria nodded, unaffected by the sarcasm. She began her work with quiet precision, focusing entirely on the task. When the tray was ready, she carefully carried it to Ethan's room, her heart wondering how the boy would react to a stranger's presence. Maria entered Ethan's room, where sunlight softly filtered through the blue curtains. The room was simple yet elegant, with a large bed and shelves lined with old books. In one corner, Ethan sat on the floor, his head bent over a sketchbook, the pages covered in messy scribbles. The sight of the boy, so absorbed in his solitude, made Maria's heart ache. She could sense the heavy silence that enveloped him like a shield. Maria quietly placed the tray of food on a small table nearby and stepped back, giving Ethan his space. The boy said nothing and didn't look up. Maria sat on a chair near the door, her hands tightly gripping her apron, careful not to startle him. But deep inside, she wondered if she could ever reach the boy hidden behind that wall of silence. Days passed, and Maria continued her silent routine. She brought meals to Ethan, cleaned his room, and maintained her distance, hoping he would slowly open up. One morning, Maria brought her old violin to the courtyard, where the sound could reach Ethan's room. She began playing a gentle melody, each note flowing like a soothing breeze. Ethan stepped out of his room, his wide eyes filled with surprise. He sat on the steps, listening intently. When the piece ended, Maria smiled at him, her expression filled with hope. Ethan didn't speak, but he moved closer, placing his hand on the violin as if to ask about it. From that moment, a bond began to form. The boy, once locked in silence, started to giggle as Maria played cheerful tunes. He even drew pictures of the violin and handed them to her. Maria realized that though he didn't say it, Ethan found comfort in her music and her quiet patience. Maria was playing a soft melody on her violin when a sharp voice shattered the tranquil atmosphere. "What do you think you're doing?" Mrs. Julia Blake, Ethan's speech therapist, marched into the courtyard, her heels clicking against the stone tiles. Her scrutinizing gaze swept over Maria from head to toe. "Don't you realize this boy needs real therapy? Music isn't going to make him talk," Mrs. Blake said, her tone dripping with disdain. Maria remained silent, clutching her violin, her eyes slightly lowered. Mrs. Blake turned to Henry, who had just stepped out into the corridor. "Mr. Lawson, I need to be honest. This girl's presence is only making Ethan retreat further into himself. If you truly want your son to recover, I recommend letting her go." Henry hesitated, his gaze shifting to Maria, who stood quietly, her expression calm but her eyes betraying a flicker of hurt. "But Ethan seems to be improving with her around," he said, his voice uncertain. "Improving?" Mrs. Blake scoffed. "That's superficial progress. Ethan needs to talk, not listen to music. I'm an expert in this field, and I assure you, keeping her here will only make things worse." Henry fell silent, clearly torn. Maria quietly left the courtyard, her emotions held tightly in check. She knew she couldn't argue against the words of a professional, but deep down, she also knew that Ethan had started opening up to her in a way no words could ever achieve. One morning, Maria was summoned to Henry's study. She stood before the large wooden door, a wave of apprehension washing over her. As she stepped inside, Henry's eyes were heavy with the weight of an agonizing decision. "Maria," he began, his voice low and measured, "I'm deeply grateful for everything you've done for Ethan, but I have to do what I believe is best for him. I've decided to let you go." Maria froze, the world around her seeming to crumble. Yet she merely bowed her head, her expression calm but her heart breaking. Henry continued, his tone somber. "This isn't what I want, but I can't ignore the advice of a professional. Please know this isn't your fault." The following day, Maria packed her belongings in silence. As she descended the grand staircase, Ethan appeared at the top of the stairs, tears streaming down his face. Suddenly, he shouted, "Don't go, Maria!" Maria stopped in her tracks, her eyes widening in shock. It was the first time Ethan had spoken since his mother's death. Henry, equally stunned, stared at his son in disbelief. Ethan ran toward Maria, wrapping his arms tightly around her. "Maria, "Don't go," he repeated, his voice trembling with emotion. Henry froze, unable to believe what he had just heard. His son, silent for so long, had finally spoken. Overwhelmed with regret and gratitude, Henry's eyes filled with tears as he stepped forward. Placing a trembling hand on Maria's shoulder, he said, his voice breaking, "I was wrong. I should have trusted you. Please, stay. Ethan needs you, and so do I." After the emotional incident, Henry quickly dismissed Mrs. Blake. He realized her advice wasn't driven by what was best for Ethan, but by her arrogance and prejudice toward Maria. Henry found Maria in the garden behind the mansion, playing a gentle melody on her violin. When she saw him, Maria stopped, her eyes filled with uncertainty. But Henry offered her a small, warm smile. "Maria," he said, his voice sincere, "I was wrong. I should never have doubted your worth. Ethan needs you, and so do I." Maria was momentarily surprised but didn't respond, simply bowing her head softly. From that day on, Maria stayed at the mansion. Each passing day strengthened the bond between her and Ethan. Through her music and patience, she continued to help the boy open up. As for Henry, he began spending more time with Maria and Ethan. Simple dinners in the kitchen, quiet walks in the garden, or stargazing on the terrace at night. All these moments wove a deep connection between them. It wasn't just admiration anymore, Henry realized. He had fallen in love with Maria. Her silence wasn't a barrier, but a testament to her sincerity and inner strength, qualities that had profoundly changed his family. After realizing Maria's importance to Ethan and to himself, Henry took the time to truly understand the quiet yet powerful woman who had entered their lives. Day by day, their relationship deepened through simple moments, caring for Ethan together, sharing dinners in the kitchen, and spending evenings under the stars as Maria played her gentle melodies on the violin. One spring afternoon, Henry led Maria to the rose garden behind the mansion. The air was quiet, filled only with birdsong and the soft fragrance of blooming flowers. He stopped under an arch of roses, his eyes filled with tenderness, but also resolve. "Maria," he began, his voice steady and sincere, "when you came here, I thought you would help Ethan heal from his pain, but I didn't realize that you wouldn't just help my son. You've changed my life entirely." Maria looked at Henry, her eyes wide with surprise, but also tinged with apprehension. "You've taught me that love doesn't need words, and that patience is the most powerful way to heal. Maria, I can't imagine a single day without you in my life, or Ethan's." Henry took a deep breath, his hands slightly trembling as he reached into his pocket. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on him, but when he looked into Maria's eyes, so full of quiet strength, his resolve solidified. He knelt down, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. When he opened it, a simple yet elegant ring sparkled inside. "Maria Bennett," he said softly, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "will you marry me?" Maria froze for a moment, her eyes brimming with tears. She nodded, a radiant smile breaking across her face. Though she couldn't speak, her expression said everything he needed to hear. Henry slid the ring onto her finger, and together they walked back toward the mansion, where Ethan stood waiting. The boy cheered excitedly when he realized their family would soon be complete. Spring sunlight filtered gently through the stained glass windows of the small chapel on the Lawson estate. The air was filled with the soft fragrance of wildflowers that decorated every corner, creating an atmosphere of quiet elegance. All eyes were on the couple of the day, Maria Bennett and Henry Lawson. Maria stepped into the chapel, her hands trembling slightly but her gaze steady and full of determination. She wore a simple yet graceful white dress adorned with delicate lace details. In her hands she held a bouquet of wildflowers picked that morning by Ethan, a meaningful gift from the boy she now considered her son. Ethan stood proudly next to Henry at the altar, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face glowing with pride and joy. As Maria approached, her eyes met Henry's, and an unspoken connection passed between them, a bond so deep it seemed to silence the world around them. The priest began the ceremony, his voice steady and warm, lending a sacred air to the moment. When the time came, the priest turned to Maria and asked the question everyone had been waiting for. "Do you, Maria Bennett, take Henry Lawson to be your husband, to love and cherish him for the rest of your life." Maria looked into Henry's eyes, her own brimming with tears, her lips parted slightly, and then, to everyone's astonishment, a voice emerged, shaky yet clear. "I do." The chapel fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in before it erupted into a chorus of applause and joyous tears. Ethan ran to Maria, wrapping his arms around her tightly. "Maria, you're amazing!" he cried, his voice filled with emotion. Henry, the ever-composed businessman, found himself unable to hold back his tears. He took Maria's hands in his own, his gaze filled with awe and love. "A miracle," someone whispered in the crowd. But to those closest to Maria, they knew this was more than just a miraculous moment. It was a testament to the power of love and patience. As the ceremony concluded, Maria, Henry, and Ethan stepped into the sunlit garden. Laughter and congratulations filled the air, a testament to the joy shared by all who had witnessed the day. Maria had not only found her voice, but had also discovered the family she had longed for. That evening, Maria sat with her violin under the stars. Ethan rested his head on her shoulder while Henry sat across from them, his gaze never straying from the two people who now meant the world to him. A soft melody flowed from Maria's violin, saying everything that words could not, of love, family, and hope. After the wedding, life at the Lawson mansion was never the same. Every corridor and room was now filled with laughter and the vibrant sounds of a home truly alive. Maria, Henry, and Ethan didn't just become a family, they found deeper ways to connect with one another. Ethan, once lost in silence, now regularly expressed himself. He began learning the violin from Maria, and evenings at the mansion were often filled with simple yet meaningful melodies played by the two of them. Slowly, Ethan regained his confidence and even started attending lessons with other children in the village, something he never thought possible before. Henry, who had spent years immersed in work, realized that family was the most precious thing of all. He began spending more time with Ethan and Maria, from strolls in the rose garden to weekend trips outside the town. He also became a more attentive father, learning to understand Ethan through his expressions and gestures, a lesson he'd learned from Maria. Maria, now an integral part of the Lawson family, was not only a loving wife but also an inspiration. After the miraculous moment at their wedding, Maria began using her voice more, each word carrying profound meaning. She also started a small music class at the mansion, where local children could learn to express themselves through music. One sunny day in the garden, Ethan turned to Maria and said, "Mom, I want to perform my violin for everyone." Maria smiled, pride shining in her eyes as she looked at the boy who had once been trapped in silence but now had the courage to stand before others. Together with Henry, she arranged a small concert at the mansion, where Ethan played the very first piece Maria had ever played for him. The performance was not only a milestone for Ethan, but also a reminder of the power of love, patience, and music to heal. Under the starry sky that night, Henry held Maria's hand and whispered, "You didn't just bring a voice to Ethan. You brought light to my life. I can't imagine a life without you and him." Maria smiled, squeezing his hand gently. The sound of Ethan's violin drifted from the living room, and in that moment, they all knew they had found true peace.